The galactic elites sat upon their thrones of polished bone and metal, eyes glimmering beneath the weight of crowns forged from the ruins of conquered worlds. Earth was just another name etched into their conquests, a world of vanquished warriors now nothing more than a hushed whisper in the cosmic annals of the defeated. General Krall reclined, his talons clinking against the armrest. He gazed through the vast viewport where the smoldering husk of Earth hung like a dead star. The humans were formidable once, he mused. But now they're just ghosts, hiding in the wreckage of their own civilization. Across the chamber, the other elites chortled, tusks and fangs flashing. To them, Earth was a broken thing. Its armies were scattered, its heroes either dead or enslaved, and its cities crushed under the boot of Krall's warships. The galactic elites toasted their dominance with chalices brimming with blood-red nectar. Far below, in the shadow of a mountain that had once been a bastion of resistance, Jack's crane moved through the ashen remains of a forest. His boots crunched over charred twigs and scorched leaves, each step a reminder of what had been taken. Jax was a man out of place and out of time. Shoulders stooped beneath a threadbare cloak, a grizzled beard framing a face marked by both age and the scars of 100 battles. Jax's cabin was little more than a shack of rusted metal and splintered wood. Inside, a single candle flickered atop a battered table. The room was lined with relics from the war, a plasma rifle, its energy cells depleted, a helmet bearing the insignia of the Earth Defense Corps, and a knife, its blade still sharp. Jax settled into his creaking chair, the sound echoing in the oppressive silence. He closed his eyes, letting the memories come. The thunder of artillery. The screams of soldiers as Krall's forces overran the last stronghold. The scent of burning flesh. The eyes of his daughter, Alina, as she was pulled from his arms, her screams swallowed by the roar of an alien transport. A harsh static burst through the silence. Jax's eyes snapped open. He rose, shuffling toward the corner of the room where a cobbled-together radio sat crackling and sparking. He twisted the dial, the voice sharpening into clarity. "Last known human holdouts located in the ruins of Sector Delta," the voice droned. It was a transmission from the Elite Command Center. "General Krall has authorized the deployment of a hunter squad to eliminate all remaining resistance leaders. Kill on sight." Jax's jaw clenched. He knew Sector Delta. It was where Alina had been taken, where the last human stronghold had fallen. He pressed a trembling hand to the wall, feeling the cool metal against his palm. The ache in his bones was deeper now, the years heavier. But beneath that ache was a heat, a simmering ember that refused to die. His gaze fell to the helmet on the table. Once, he had been a warrior. Once, his name had meant something. But that was a lifetime ago. The radio crackled again. Repeat. Hunter squad deploying within the hour. All resistance leaders are to be executed. Jax's hand curled into a fist. If they found Alina, they would kill her. And if they killed her, there would be nothing left for him to lose. He reached for the knife. The hilt was worn, the grip molded to his hand. In the distance, the ground trembled. The roar of alien dropships echoed through the valley. Krall was making good on his promise. The hunt had begun. Jax stepped outside, the cold wind biting against his weathered skin. Ash fell from the sky like black snow. In the far distance, the mountains loomed, their jagged peaks casting long shadows over the ruined city below. Jax scanned the horizon, his eyes narrowing at the sight of alien ships cutting through the sky, their engines howling like wolves. Something moved in the trees. Jax's muscles tensed. A child stumbled through the underbrush, his clothes torn and his face smudged with soot. Behind him, a pair of alien drones hovered, energy weapons humming as they closed in. Jax moved without thinking. The knife was in his hand, his body a blur of motion. The first drone swung toward him, a plasma bolt sizzling past his ear. Jax lunged, the knife plunging deep into the drone's sensor array. Sparks exploded, and the machine spiraled to the ground, smoking. The second drone swiveled, its weapon charging. Jax threw the knife. The blade struck true, embedding itself in the drone's central processor. The machine dropped like a stone. The child stared up at Jax, eyes wide. Who are you?" Jax knelt, retrieving his knife. He sheathed it with a grim expression. No one important. The child's lip trembled. They took my brother. They took everyone. Jack swallowed, his throat tight. Where? Sector Delta, the boy whispered. They said they're going to kill them all. Jax rose to his feet, his gaze hardening as he stared toward the distant city. The elites thought Earth was broken. They thought the fight was over. They thought there were no warriors left. They were wrong. Jax stepped back into his cabin, pulling open a rusted trunk. Inside lay his old combat armor, scorched and scarred but still intact. Piece by piece, he strapped it on, feeling the weight of it settle over his body like an old, familiar ache. The helmet went on last. The visor slid down, the HUD flickering to life, data scrolling across his vision. Outside, the wind howled, and the ground shuddered beneath the weight of alien dropships. Jax Crane, the last warrior of Earth, stepped out of the cabin and into the storm. In the distance, General Krall watched the human city burn, his talons clicking against the metal railing of his command ship. He did not see the lone figure moving through the smoke. He did not hear the whispers of those who remembered the old legends. And he did not feel the tremor that rippled through the ashes, the tremor of something old, something fierce, something that refused to die. Jax moved swiftly, his eyes fixed on the horizon, his fists clenched. He had no army, no allies, no hope. But he had a knife, a name, and a promise. And for now, that would be enough. The wind carried the scent of burning metal and charred earth as Jax Crane moved through the ruins of what was once New Denver. The skyline had been reduced to jagged skeletal towers, their frames twisted and blackened by alien plasma strikes. The streets were littered with the remnants of humanity, rusted vehicles overturned and scorched, personal belongings scattered like the forgotten echoes of a better time. Jax moved with purpose, his eyes sharp beneath the visor of his helmet. The HUD flickered with readouts, scanning for signs of movement, for the signature pulse of alien drones or the heat trails of Krall's hunters. But all he heard was the howl of the wind and the distant thud of alien dropships settling into the outskirts of the city. The boy followed close behind him, small and silent, his eyes darting from shadow to shadow. Jax had learned his name was Caleb, and that he was 9 years old. That was all Caleb had said, and Jax hadn't asked for more. Words were pointless now. There was only the mission. Ahead, the street opened into what had once been a marketplace. Now, it was a graveyard of fallen structures, the ground cratered and steaming. Jax crouched behind a toppled column, raising a battered pair of binoculars to his eyes. 2 hunter drones hovered just above the rubble, their dark, insectal forms scanning the area with piercing blue lights. Below them, a squad of 4 elite soldiers moved in formation, their heavy boots crunching over debris. Each was clad in gleaming black armor, segmented and sharp, the emblem of the Galactic elites emblazoned across their chests, a single unblinking eye. Jax's jaw tightened. These weren't just soldiers. These were Krall's personal hunters, his elite enforcers trained to track and exterminate. They moved with ruthless precision, their weapons sweeping the ruins like scythes through a field. "Stay down," Jax muttered to Caleb. The boy pressed himself against the column, his breath coming in shallow gasps. Jax reached into his belt, pulling free a cylindrical device the size of his fist. He thumbed the activation switch, and a soft blue glow pulsed to life. It was a jammer cobbled together from scavenged parts, capable of disrupting the drone sensors for a few seconds, long enough. Jax tossed the device, sending it skidding across the ground toward the hunters. It clattered to a stop beneath the nearest drone, its pulse expanding in a silent wave. The drone shuddered, its lights flickering, its targeting systems momentarily blinded. The hunters paused, their weapons rising. Jax moved. He surged forward, his boots slamming into the ground as he leapt onto the nearest hunter. His knife gleamed in the dull light as he drove it down, piercing the weak spot between the soldier's neckplate and helmet. The hunter jerked, a strangled cry escaping his lips, then fell, blood pooling beneath him. The second hunter spun, weapon raised. Jax dropped to a knee, snatching up the fallen soldier's plasma rifle. He squeezed the trigger, and a bolt of sizzling blue energy lanced through the air, striking the second hunter in the chest. The soldier crumpled, smoke rising from the charred hole in his armor. The drones snapped back online, their sensor arrays recalibrating. They swiveled toward Jax, weapons humming as they prepared to fire. Jax rolled to the side, coming up behind a half-collapsed wall as plasma bolts erupted where he had just been standing. The air crackled with the heat of the blasts, the stones glowing red. "Caleb!" Jax barked. "Stay down." The boy's face was white with terror, but he obeyed, curling into a tight ball behind the column. Jax gritted his teeth. The drones hovered closer, their targeting beams slicing through the air. He fired a burst from the plasma rifle, but the shots skittered off the drone's armored carapaces like pebbles against a tank. Then, a shadow loomed over him. The third hunter, massive and hulking, swung a spiked fist at Jax. Jax twisted, the blow glancing off his shoulder, sending him sprawling. Pain lanced through him, and the rifle flew from his grasp, clattering away. The hunter loomed over him, the visor of his helmet reflecting Jax's own face, a man outmatched, a man moments from death. But Jax wasn't done yet. He lunged forward, his hand closing around a shard of broken concrete. With a roar, he swung it upward, catching the hunter across the jaw. The alien staggered, momentarily dazed. Jax used the opening, drawing his knife and ramming it up beneath the soldier's helmet. Blood spurted, hot and slick, as the hunter fell, gasping. The fourth hunter stepped forward, his plasma rifle aimed squarely at Jax's chest. The drones hovered behind him, weapons trained and ready. Jax's chest rose and fell, his muscles trembling. He had nothing left. Nowhere to run. Then a sudden, sharp whistling pierced the air. The fourth hunter's head snapped back, a thin line of blood arcing through the air as a bullet punched through his helmet. The soldier dropped, dead before he hit the ground. The drones whirred, spinning toward the source of the shot, a dark alleyway to the left. A second shot rang out, and one of the drones exploded in a shower of sparks and shrapnel. The remaining drone swiveled, its weapons charging, but another shot found its sensor array, and it too crashed to the ground, smoking. Jax scrambled to his feet, chest heaving. Out of the alley stepped a woman clad in patchwork armor, her sniper rifle slung across her back. Her dark hair was tied back in a tight braid, her eyes cold and calculating. "Still breathing, old man," she said, her voice tinged with a sharp, familiar edge. Jax's eyes narrowed. "Sarah." Sarah Kane, former lieutenant of the Earth Defense Corps, and one of the last surviving resistance leaders. Once, she and Jax had fought side by side. Once, they had been comrades. Now she stood before him, her face hard and unyielding. "You're supposed to be dead," Jax said. "So were you," Sarah shot back. "Guess we're both bad at following orders." Caleb crept out from behind the column, his eyes wide. Are you here to help us?" Sarah's gaze flicked down to the boy, then back to Jax. "You're harboring strays now?" "Survivors," Jax corrected. "Like us." Sarah's jaw clenched, and for a moment, her expression softened. But it was gone just as quickly, her eyes hardening once more. "Krall's not playing around anymore. He sent his best hunters to Sector Delta. They're rounding up everyone they can find, leaders, soldiers, kids." Jax nodded, his fists tightening. "I know. That's why I'm going." Sarah shook her head. "You go in there alone, you're dead. Krall's got the place locked down tighter than a vice. We need a plan." "I don't have time for a plan," Jax said, voice sharp. "They have Alina. They have my daughter." Sarah's expression faltered, a shadow passing over her eyes. "Alina's still alive?" "That's what I'm going to find out," Jax said, turning away. Sarah stepped forward, grabbing his arm. "Jax, wait." Jax met her gaze, his jaw clenched. "You go in there now, you'll get yourself killed. And you won't save anyone," Sarah said, her voice fierce. "But if you listen to me, if we do this together, we might just stand a chance." Jax's breath came in ragged bursts, the weight of years pressing down on him. He looked down at Caleb, who was staring up at him with wide, frightened eyes. Then he looked back at Sarah. "All right," Jack said, his voice low, resolute. "What's the plan?" Sarah's lips curved into a grim smile. "We're going to show Crawl that Earth isn't dead yet." The wind howled through the ruins, carrying the scent of smoke and blood. Somewhere in the distance, the rumble of alien engines echoed, growing closer. The hunt had only just begun. Jack stood in the center of the underground chamber, the air heavy with the scent of stale sweat and damp earth. The room was lit by a scattering of salvaged lamps, their dull glow casting long shadows over the faces of the survivors gathered before him. Men and women of all ages, some clad in tattered military fatigues, others in ragged civilian clothes, stared back at him with hollow, haunted eyes. Sarah stood at Jax's side, her arms crossed, her jaw clenched. Caleb huddled close to her leg, his small hands gripping the frayed hem of her coat. Jax swept his gaze over the crowd. They were fewer than he remembered. The last time he had been here, there had been 100 fighters. Now, there were barely 30. Crawl's hunters had done their work well. "You all know why you're here," Jack said, his voice carrying through the chamber. "Crawl has unleashed his hunters. They're targeting every last one of us, resistance leaders, soldiers, children. No one is safe." A murmur of unease rippled through the crowd. "And what are we supposed to do?" a man with a missing eye shouted, his scarred face twisted in a grimace. "Fight them with what? Rocks and sticks? We're dead either way." Jax took a step forward, his expression hard as stone. "If we don't fight, we're already dead." Sarah unfolded her arms, her voice cutting through the rising whispers. "Jax is right. Crawl thinks we're beaten, that we're nothing but a bunch of starving rats hiding in the ruins. But he's wrong. Wrong." A woman with a blood-stained bandage around her arm scoffed. "He's got drones and hunters. We've got kids and broken rifles. How exactly is he wrong?" Jax reached down, pulling his knife from its sheath. The blade gleamed under the dim light, its edge wickedly sharp. "Crawl may have drones. He may have hunters. But he's forgotten one thing." The crowd leaned in, eyes fixed on the blade. "He's forgotten that we're still here," Jack said, his voice rising. "He's forgotten that we're still breathing. And as long as we're still breathing, we can still fight." A hush fell over the chamber. Caleb's eyes widened, his gaze locked on Jax's knife. Sarah watched Jax with a guarded expression, as though trying to see the man he once was beneath the scars and grime. Jax sheathed the knife, his jaw clenched. "We can't win by charging in headfirst. We can't take them on in a straight fight. But we don't need to." Sarah stepped forward, raising a small, handheld device. A holographic map flickered to life above it, displaying the ruins of Sector Delta. Red markers dotted the landscape, Crawl's hunting patrols, surveillance drones, command outposts. "Crawl's got his men spread thin," Sarah said. "They're relying on their tech to keep them connected. We disrupt their communications. We blind them. And if we blind them, we can take them down one by one." A man with a shock of gray hair scowled. "And how do you plan to do that?" "With this," Sarah said, holding up a small, cylindrical device. "It's a signal scrambler. Crude, but it'll fry their systems for a few minutes, long enough to separate the hunters from the drones." "And then what?" the gray-haired man pressed. "Then we take them down the old-fashioned way," Jack said, his voice as sharp as the knife at his hip. "Close quarters. Silent. No mercy." The one-eyed man shook his head, his lips twisted in a sneer. "You're asking us to throw our lives away." Jax's eyes locked onto the man's, his gaze unflinching. "I'm asking you to remember who we are." The man's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Sarah deactivated the hologram, tucking the device into her belt. "Crawl's expecting us to run. He's expecting us to hide. But if we strike first, if we hit them hard, we can send a message." "What message?" Caleb asked, his voice small but clear. Jax crouched down, his eyes level with the boys. "That we're still here. That Earth still has warriors." Caleb swallowed, his gaze darting to the knife at Jax's side. For a moment, the chamber was silent, the air thick with the weight of unspoken fears and unyielding resolve. Then, one by one, the survivors nodded. The gray-haired man stepped forward, his expression grim. "I'll take the south sector. There's a patrol that's been sweeping through every 2 hours. I can handle them." A young woman with a streak of red in her hair stepped up next. "I'll go with him. I've still got a sniper's rifle and a clear shot from the old watchtower." Jack stood, his back straight. "Good. Keep it quiet. Keep it fast. We hit them where they least expect it, and we vanish before they know what happened." Sarah placed a hand on Jax's shoulder. "You and I will take the central hub. That's where they're holding the prisoners. If Alina's there, we'll find her." Jax nodded, his jaw tight. "Let's move." They dispersed into the tunnels, their footsteps echoing through the darkness like the drumbeat of a gathering storm. Hours later, the air was thick with the scent of ozone and blood. The remains of a drone smoldered in a heap, its metal shell smoking, its sensors shattered. Jax wiped blood from his brow, his chest heaving. Sarah knelt beside a fallen hunter, yanking her knife free from his throat. "That's the last of them," she said, rising to her feet. "But they'll know we're here now." "That's the idea," Jack said, his eyes fixed on the looming structure ahead, a squat, fortress-like compound with high walls and razor wire glinting under the pale moonlight. "The command hub." Sarah handed Jax a fresh plasma clip, her fingers stained red. "Ready." Jax took the clip, sliding it into his rifle. "Ready." They moved as one, slipping through the shadows toward the compound. The gates were guarded by 2 sentries, their armor gleaming like obsidian under the floodlights. Jax held up a hand, and Sarah nodded, disappearing into the darkness. Seconds later, the first guard dropped, his neck snapped with a single precise twist. The second guard had just enough time to draw his weapon before Jax's knife buried itself in his throat. The gate creaked open, and they slipped inside. The air was heavy with the scent of burnt metal and stale blood. Beyond the courtyard, rows of makeshift cells loomed, each one filled with ragged, half-starved prisoners. Jax's heart pounded, his eyes scanning the cells. He stepped forward, his voice a low, urgent rasp. "Alina." Sarah grabbed his arm, her expression fierce. "Stay focused. We'll find her." A scream echoed through the compound, high-pitched, terrified. A child's scream. Jax's blood turned to ice. Without thinking, he sprinted forward, Sarah on his heels. They rounded a corner, emerging into a narrow corridor lined with cells. At the far end, a hunter loomed over a young girl, his hand gripping her throat. The girl's eyes were wide, her face twisted in pain. Jax's heart clenched. "Alina." Before the hunter could react, Jax was upon him, his fist slamming into the alien's jaw with bone-cracking force. The hunter staggered back, his grip loosening on the girl's neck. Alina fell to the ground, gasping for air. Jax grabbed the hunter's helmet, yanking it off to reveal a snarling, tusked face. The alien roared, swinging a fist, but Jax ducked, driving his knee into the hunter's ribs. The alien dropped to his knees, wheezing. Jax raised his knife, his face a mask of fury. "This is for my daughter," he growled, and drove the blade home. The hunter slumped forward, dead. Jax dropped to his knees, pulling Alina into his arms. She sobbed against his chest, her small body shaking. Jax's eyes burned as he clutched her tight, his heart pounding with relief and rage. Sarah's voice crackled through the comlink. "Jax, we need to move. Now." Jax rose, lifting Alina into his arms. "I'm not leaving her again," he said, his voice steel. Sarah's reply was grim. "Then you'd better hold on. Crawl just arrived." The sky was the color of blood. Jax Crane crouched behind a crumbling barricade, his arms wrapped tightly around Alina's trembling form. All around him, the battlefield was a maelstrom of chaos. Alien dropships descended like vultures, their engines screaming as they discharged waves of hunters into the ruins. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air, lighting the night with flashes of violent blue. Sarah knelt beside Jax, her jaw set, eyes narrowed as she fired a steady volley of shots toward the advancing line of elite soldiers. "We can't hold them here," she shouted, ejecting a spent plasma cartridge. "We need to fall back." Jax's gaze swept over the shattered courtyard. They had chosen the old monument site as their last stand, a sprawling plaza once dedicated to Earth's fallen warriors, now a desolate graveyard of shattered stone and broken statues. There was nowhere left to run. "No," Jax said, his voice low but firm. "We hold the line here." Sarah's jaw clenched. "You're going to get us all killed." "Not all of us," Jax said, his eyes shifting to Alina. The girl clung to his arm, her face buried against his chest. "You have to get her out of here." Sarah shook her head, her expression fierce. "I'm not leaving you behind." "You have to," Jax said, his voice cracking. "If Kral gets his hands on her, it's over." A deafening crash echoed through the plaza as one of the monument's statues, a towering bronze soldier with a raised fist, crumbled under the weight of an incoming dropship. Alien hunters poured out, weapons blazing. The few remaining resistance fighters fired back, but they were outnumbered, outgunned, and exhausted. Jax's gaze swept the battlefield. Bodies lay strewn across the ground, human and alien alike. The scent of ozone and burning flesh thickened the air, stinging his eyes. Then, through the smoke, a shadow moved. Jax's breath caught in his throat as Kral emerged, his hulking frame silhouetted against the burning horizon. The elite general stood taller than any of his soldiers, his obsidian armor gleaming beneath the blood-red sky. His tusks curved wickedly from a snarling mouth, and his eyes glowed a venomous yellow. Kral's gaze swept the battlefield, locking onto Jax. A cruel smile twisted his lips. "Crane," he boomed, his voice echoing like thunder. "The last of Earth's warriors. And here I thought you died with the rest of them." Jax rose to his feet, his hands tightening around the plasma rifle. "I'm still here." Kral's smile widened. "Not for long." He lifted his arm, and a line of hunters surged forward, their weapons raised. Sarah grabbed Jax's arm, her face pale. "There's too many of them." "Get her out of here," Jax said, pushing Alina into Sarah's arms. "Go." Sarah hesitated, her eyes searching Jax's face. Then, with a fierce nod, she wrapped her arms around Alina and sprinted toward the shattered remains of a nearby building. Jax turned back to the battlefield. The hunters were closing in, their footfalls heavy, their weapons primed. Kral watched from behind them, his expression smug, confident. Jax took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the knife at his hip. It was the last weapon he had left, the same knife he had carried since the beginning, its edge still sharp, its grip still warm. The first hunter lunged, a plasma blade arcing toward Jax's throat. Jax sidestepped, the blade slicing through empty air. He drove his fist into the hunter's gut, then slammed the butt of the rifle against the alien's skull. The hunter crumpled, his weapon clattering to the ground. Two more surged forward, their plasma rifles blazing. Jax ducked low, rolling beneath the bolts as they seared the air above him. He came up behind the second hunter, slashing his knife across the alien's hamstring. The hunter roared, collapsing to one knee. Jax grabbed the fallen plasma rifle and fired a single shot into the alien's back. A plasma bolt grazed Jax's shoulder, searing through the fabric of his jacket. Pain flared, hot and blinding, but he gritted his teeth and pushed forward. The hunters kept coming. Jax was a blur of motion, the knife flashing, the rifle firing until it clicked empty. The ground beneath him was slick with blood, alien and human, and his breaths came in ragged, desperate bursts. Kral watched it all, his yellow eyes gleaming with dark amusement. When the last hunter fell, Jax was on his knees, the knife shaking in his blood-slick hand. Kral strode forward, his heavy boots crunching over the rubble. He stopped before Jax, looking down at the battered, bloodied man with contempt. "You fought well," Kral said, his voice almost a purr. "But you've lost." Jax forced himself to his feet, his legs trembling. Blood dripped from a gash across his brow, blurring his vision. "It's not over." Kral laughed, a deep, bone-rattling sound. "Oh, but it is." He reached down, grabbing Jax by the throat and lifting him off the ground. Jax's boots dangled, his hands clawing at Krall's iron grip as the elite general sneered. "You humans were supposed to be warriors," Krall said, his hot breath washing over Jax's face. "But you're just insects, scurrying around in the ashes of your dead world." Jax's vision darkened, his lungs burning. His hand fumbled at his waist, fingers closing around the hilt of the knife. With the last of his strength, he drove the blade up, plunging it deep into Krall's neck. Krall's eyes widened, a strangled roar escaping his throat. Blood spurted, hot and thick, as Jax twisted the knife, forcing it deeper. Krall dropped him, staggering back, one massive hand clutching the blade embedded in his neck. Jax hit the ground hard, his chest heaving, his vision swimming. Krall fell to his knees, blood pouring between his fingers as he glared down at Jax. You're nothing," he rasped, his voice a wet, gurgling snarl. Jax dragged himself forward, his face inches from Krall's. "Earth still has warriors," he whispered, his voice a ragged hiss. "And we don't die easy." Krall's eyes dimmed, the life draining from them as he slumped forward, collapsing in a heap of blood and black armor. Jax lay beside the body, his chest rising and falling in shallow, labored breaths. The battlefield was silent now, the air heavy and still. The fires still burned, casting flickering shadows across the broken monuments. A soft hand touched his face. Jax opened his eyes, and Alina's face swam into view, her cheeks streaked with dirt and tears. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice quivering. Jax managed a weak smile, his hand reaching up to touch her cheek. "You're safe," he said, his voice breaking. "You're safe." Sarah appeared behind Alina, her face drawn, her eyes shining. "The hunters are falling back," she said, her voice thick. "It's over." Jax's eyelids fluttered, the darkness closing in. "Not yet," he murmured, his gaze fixed on Alina. "Not until we rebuild." His hand fell to the ground, fingers twitching once before going still. Alina sobbed, clutching her father's hand as Sarah knelt beside them, her own tears falling. Above them, the first rays of dawn pierced the smoke-choked sky, illuminating the battlefield in a soft, golden light. The last of the hunters fled into the distance, the air thick with the sound of their retreat. Jax Crane's body lay still amidst the wreckage, his eyes closed, his face at peace. Around him, the survivors began to gather, their faces lifted toward the rising sun. Earth was still scarred, still bleeding, but not broken. And in the distance, the sound of a rallying cry echoed through the ruins, a call to arms that carried across the desolate landscape, a reminder to all who remained. Earth still had warriors. And their fight had only just begun.